Greece, 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 Greece. What are we going to do about Greece? Now, I know you probably heard a lot about this already. It's been all over the news, very hard to miss. But let me try to break it down for you, okay? Because there's a lot going on here. So Greece owes a debt payment to the IMF tomorrow, Tuesday, June 30th, $1.7 billion. It's been haggling with the EU. It's bureaucrat masters like for the last month or more about this. Greece doesn't have the money to pay. If they don't pay, which I think they said they're not going to pay, they're going to be in default, and that's going to create a ripple effect through the financial markets. We saw a lot of that already on Monday. Particularly, it's going to hurt a lot of European banks, which still own lots of Greek debt. Meanwhile, the EU says no more bailouts. That's it. No more loans unless you agree to our terms. And of course, what are the terms? They're the same terms: austerity, cuts in worker salaries, cuts in pensions, privatizations, basically all the stuff that has resulted in the Greek economy getting totally gutted, okay? And what happens, that makes the debt larger and larger, at least as a percentage of GDP. Greece is never going to be able to pay it back. So now Alexis Tsipras says he's going to hold a referendum on July 5th to ask the Greek people whether or not they want to go along with these onerous bailout terms offered up by their Euro masters, okay? But the Euro masters say if the people vote no, then that's it. You're out. Fuck you. Screw you and your democracy. Just pay us or get the hell out and go back to your stupid drachma, which, by the way, I don't think would be a bad idea, in my opinion. I think that's probably what Greece should have done right from the very beginning, but for whatever reason, it hasn't done that. And don't get me wrong, if they go back to the drachma, I know there's going to be a lot of pain initially, maybe a lot of inflation, but at least Greece will have its sovereignty back, and it won't have a bunch of predatory mongrels, feasting over its last remains and removing any final shred of dignity of the Greek people, because that's what's going on here, okay? And by the way, these loans, all these loans, this debt, it's pretty much all was a result of fraud by the financial sector, but, that's a whole other story. But I wanted to mention that because, some of you might be saying, hey, look, Greece ran up all this debt. It's got to pay, right? If you spend more than you got to pay. But anyway, it was fraud. But this referendum, this is making, the EU masters go crazy. This Jean-Claude Juncker, who's the head of the EU, he viciously attacked Greece today, hurling all kinds of lies and insults. He said outright lying through his teeth, this guy, saying there were no pension cuts. Well, it's written right in the document. The document's online. I mean, it's right in the freaking document. They're talking about pension cuts. He said no. And he goes on crying like a little prissy prima donna baby, saying that he was betrayed. He was betrayed. He was betrayed? Come on. And he says to the Greeks, don't commit suicide. You have to trust your lenders because your government is a bunch of liars. Really, you got to trust your lenders, the ones who've been sucking the blood out of you for so long? I mean, this is so the other way around. By the way, this clown Juncker, he's an unelected bureaucrat, okay? Where'd he come from? Well, he was running that little country, Luxembourg. You ever hear about that? He turned that thing into a major tax haven for rich people, and probably most of that money was illicit, right? Even Switzerland didn't want that money. So that says a lot right there. So now he's the guy speaking for all the people of Europe. I mean, come on, this guy is so corrupt. He makes our corrupt elite look like saints over here in the United States. Anyway, it spawned some pretty funny comments on Twitter. People were saying things like, hey, thanks for that speech today. That's a great boost for the no camp, as in the people who are likely to vote no next Sunday. So the whole situation is really crazy. And by the way, just as a little aside to everything that's going on here, there was this story in the New York Times. New York Times prints a story, sort of portraying how all these poor hedge fund guys like John Paulson and David Einhorn and all our big hedge fund players here, they're all in a panic about what's going on because apparently they own a bunch of Greek debt. But here's the New York Times with this big story about these poor, entitled parasites and what's going to happen to their portfolios, showing once again, okay, that they're really shitty investors. And every time they get in a jam, what happens? Who do you think's behind all this pressure on Greece to cut salaries, to cut pensions, to privatize, to, all this misery? It's so these guys could get their money back, right? Anyway, this whole thing might come down to what the people of Greece are going to say. It could go any way, but I know that polls up until now mostly have been showing that the Greek people don't want to leave the euro, so they might actually keep themselves locked into this poisonous arrangement. I mean, which would be horrible. All I know one thing for sure, however, and that is that the euro is going lower. Absolutely going lower. Might be choppy, might take some time, but it's going lower. So do yourself a favor, folks. Trade Forex. Get my videos if you haven't gotten them already. Anyway, that's it for now. This is Mike Norman saying see you next time. Bye-bye.